us. So tonight for our time together, I really wanted to make sure to give you guys a chance to have like a current market update. So Mandy has been kind enough to join us tonight, and she's going to provide that with just kind of what we're seeing right now out there from a numbers-based perspective. I know y'all have heard rumors, right? Things are crazy. The world, the sky is falling. So we really wanted to give you guys the real numbers to be looking at for what we're seeing right now. With that, then, I'll come back in and I would like to talk you guys through how to best prepare yourselves for entering this market if you are looking at purchasing a home in the very near future or, in the next year or two. So there's both sides of that coin that we need to look at. So, Mandy, if I can, I'll have you take it away and start us off with that realistic expectations.
I will. Thanks, Julie. It's nice to see everyone tonight. So I'm just going to briefly kind of talk about what we're seeing in our market, give you some real numbers, and then also a little bit of a strategy session when you're talking about moving forward into buying your first home. And excuse my background. I have cement walls behind me, so it always feels like something better is nicer. Okay, so market numbers, realities, expectations, and strategies. So what we are seeing in the last few years is definitely an increase in our market. And can everyone see my screen okay? Yep, good, okay. So in 2017, we were below the 300,000 mark. And when we went above, that was kind of a big news day. And we've seen an 8% increase the last couple of years. And then last year, we saw an 11% increase. And right now, our median in 2020, our median home price was $350,000. And so the median means exactly in the middle. So exactly half the houses sold at $350,000 and then up or below. So what is the reality of 2021? I know everybody's out there talking about it. You see it on social media. So rather than look at year to date, I wanted to just look at the last 365 days. So in the last 365 days, our median has already increased to $365,000. And are homes selling over list price? Yes, they are. And are there multiple offers? Yes, there are. So if you're buying a home in Missoula and really outside as well, you are most likely going to be in a situation where your offer is competing with other offers. You can, I think, setting your expectations about that you see the home that you want and your very first offer is going to get that home isn't necessarily realistic. And that message for me hasn't ever been the one I have, and realtors will always tell you, you will most likely it's possible for you to put in more than one offer. And definitely in this market, I would expect you to put up maybe a few offers in before you have your house secured. In the last 90 days, the median sold price was 5% over list. So that means that of the sold houses, over half of them paid more than 5% over the list price. So when you are setting your expectations for what price you're going to be putting in on a house for an offer, expect to most likely pay over list price. And what that number is, it's hard to say. That's, you're going to be with your realtor professional and they're going to be looking at the data with you and talking about it. At the end of the day, though, you're the one paying the mortgage. So it's important that you feel confident with the number that you're putting in and what that means for your monthly expenses. So, do these numbers mean that you're doomed? Absolutely not. I don't know, maybe I'm a Pollyanna, but I always feel really positive about, I still think there's great opportunities. I've had great luck finding people homes in their price range, even under 200,000. It can happen. So what I like to talk about though, and what a lot of realtors are doing, is we're talking to our clients about kind of changing your scope, widening your parameters, changing your expectations a little bit. And if anybody has a question at any time, don't feel shy, break in. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, if you're wanting to be in Missoula, what are the different neighborhoods that we're looking at? And, you know, a lot of people that have lived here for a long time have most likely lived in maybe almost every neighborhood in town, or maybe that's just me. I've lived in a lot of these neighborhoods. And I can tell you something great about every single one. So, you know, it's all about what you're looking for and what you're willing to try something new, maybe outside of what you were thinking. So, you know, if we're looking at the north side, that median price is at 293,000. Rattlesnake, 515,000. So one is going to have more attainable home housing for a first-time home buyer, or really any home buyer, really, if we're thinking about it. Linda Vista is up there at 452. It's a lot of those brand new homes with a lot of square footage. Central Missoula, gotta love it, at 293. I am a little curious about this Lewis and Clark, Patty Canyon, Far Views neighborhood. We've seen a lot of crazy activity over here in this neighborhood lately, so it was surprised that it wasn't closer to where the Rattlesnake is. I think it's creeping up there a little bit. The South Hills, 332, we've seen kind of a big change in that neighborhood in the last year. Expressway, so that's over what people often call like the Harry Potterville. And that can be a great place for your first home, where you're getting in there and you're building equity and you're kind of building your portfolio in a way, even though it's your own home. East Missoula and Riverside, a lot of big changes over there. They have a new plan coming in, and I think East Missoula is kind of a special spot. Missoula, a lot of people don't know about it. And then the Mullen area. So these are just different numbers that we're seeing and kind of give you a good idea. All right, so I felt like the MLS today had a lot of great properties come on. One of them that I saw on 8th Street isn't on here, but it's a really cute one that came on under 300,000. So, another thing that you can kind of think of is, maybe you could move outside of Missoula proper to buy your first home. So I bought my first home, my husband and I, in 2004. And gosh, I meant to look up the median sale price in 2004, but our budget was $100,000 and we couldn't find anything in Missoula at that time. And we bought in Hamilton, and we added our transportation costs into our budget, and our car maintenance and things like that. And it worked for us. And, you know, we sold that house, we bought another house, worked on that one, and then eventually bought in Missoula in a neighborhood that we really wanted to be in. And even then, you know, when I ran my numbers for the house I wanted to be in Missoula, we knew we wanted to be bikeable, walkable, busable, and that we would have to cut some of our expenses. And my husband still rides his bike to work or takes the bus, because that was kind of in our original plan. Like, if we want this house, then we have to give up something else. So, and I've got some LL stuff. So, you know, you make your changes and decide what you want to do. So, okay, so if we're in Stevensville, there's 3-bed, 1-bath came on today. Or, you know, a lot of times people aren't thinking about heading north, and St. Ignatius and Our Lee have some great properties. Charlo is a little bit farther, but you can get into some cute places up there. And it's not very far from Missoula at all. There's this little spot in Alberton, 2-bed, 1-bath for 199,000. And then something else to kind of think about is, maybe what your idea of home that you were thinking changes a little bit. Maybe it's a townhome that you're getting into, or a condo. So here's a townhome in Missoula, a 3-bed, 2.5-bath townhome. In those cases, you want to make sure about the HOA costs and what that is adding to your monthly budget. So just kind of running all of those numbers. When you are ready to go looking for a house, first, I really recommend that you talk to a lender and have an idea of where you are in your budget, so that when you're ready to go, you can write a really strong offer that has a pre-approval attached, and you have all your documents in, you're ready to go. So we have a lot of great resources in Missoula, and there's a lot of lenders and there's a lot of realtors. And I really ask you to take the time and interview them. You're going to be talking to them all the time throughout the transaction, and you're creating a relationship that's going to be around for after the transaction too, really. So your lender, do they call or email you back? Do they answer the questions that you have for them? And if they don't, maybe they're not the right fit. And do you feel good about the answers that you get? Do you feel like they answered the questions? Have they completed a loan like yours before? So maybe you're doing an RD loan, which means a rural development outside of town, no down payment. Are they familiar with that? And then different lending institutions have different programs. So be sure that the lending institution that you're using has the program that you need. A realtor. We're incredibly lucky here. We have a really strong realtor association with a lot of professional development opportunities, and we've got a lot of knowledge here. We also have a lot of realtors. So it's important to ask them questions as well, and they'll appreciate you asking the questions. So don't be shy. You can ask, how many transactions have you completed in the last 12 months? The national average is 12. So that kind of gives you a baseline. Now, if they've only done 2, are they terrible and you shouldn't use them? Absolutely not. There's really strong brokerages here with great training. And so what I would ask is, who is their support team? If they've not done that many transactions, who's helping give them advice? And then also, are they working alone? Are they working in a team? And both of those options are really great. And it just depends on what you're expecting. Were you expecting only to be working with that person, or are you going to be okay working with more? Also, something that's very important to ask is, what's their strategy in a bidding war? Okay. The highest price does not always win the war. So know what their strategy is going to be for you, and you guys are talking about it. They're well informed about your situation. You guys are having all those good conversations. So if they are a newer agent, asking them who their support team is, who are they going to with questions? And if they say, well, no, I've got it covered, I know everything, that might be a red flag. That's why my red flag is there. Just in case. Everybody has questions, right? Every single transaction is different. And that's why it's good to have a lot of experience or a background with somebody to support that experience. So I've been lucky enough to be teaching for Homeward for quite some time. Julie and I do this a lot together. And I have all my clients go and take the class if they're first-time home buyers. I really encourage them to do that. You learn so much at that first class. Notice I put a plug on my screen. Get it? Plug. Anyway, my clients that come from Homeward ask such great questions. They're not afraid to ask questions. You kind of take all of that out and you learn so much more about the home buying process, and I really encourage you to take the class. Any questions? Oops.
Mandy, I didn't see any questions in the chat. But just out of curiosity, for those of you who are joining us, if you would use your reaction tools at the bottom, if you go to the far right-hand side, there's a little smiley face. how many of you are beginning your home search or actively in the home search process? Anybody like active? Brianna, you are great. Anybody else? Who would like to in the next 1 to 2 years? Okay, yeah. Is anybody so I'm hoping what Mandy showed you, yes, things are moving, but yes, there's still a chance. Who was nervous about the pricing in Missoula? Have you guys all seen the articles and been terrified? Yes, like, am I ever, if I wait 2 years, am I ever going to get there? So hopefully tonight we've given you guys the not just word on the street, but the actual numbers to back up. Yes, there are still homes available. Yes, some of the rumors are true, but we really are, with the right team in place and the right preparation, you can, we see, and then Mandy and I talk about this every time, because usually my home buyer classes are about 50 people. And usually it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 people who are like ready to go under contract 1 to 2 years out and farther. Like that's kind of a third of everybody. And it's amazing to me how we'll work with folks and work with them, maybe for 6 months, maybe for a year, and they buy their house. And it's just being prepared and finding the right fits for your teammates and making sure that you've got everything you need going into the process. And Darren's asked a good question here. What happens with areas where property values when the new development? Oh, okay. So what do you think, Mandy? Any guesses here? Get out your magic ball, your crystal ball, because that's about what we're working with these days. How property values are going to be affected as more developments come in? Because we've heard that there's quite a few developments slated for 2022 and 2023 that are going to bring new building into the market.
Well, what we're really hoping is, Missoula has just such a critical lack of inventory in our surrounding areas. So as more properties come online, it's going to hopefully decrease some of that critical need. And, hopefully we'll see some of these less crazy bidding wars. Maybe a property won't get 23 offers, there will be more opportunities for buyers and it will spread them out is what I'm hoping. So we don't know what's going to happen with the market, but I see it, continuing to go up a little bit, hopefully not quite at 11%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the housing bubble, it's interesting to see though, in 2008, when the rest of the country hit the crash, right? Missoula's crash was just a whole lot less than everywhere else. Ours was like a little tiny blip that in 2 years was like didn't even happen. So we'll see I don't know, Mandy, what is your take on that? Like, do you think that are we in the housing bubble again?
Well, real estate is cyclical. So, there's going to always be rises and there's always going to be falls. Missoula's geography keeps us from ever having too much inventory, which when there's a big oversupply, then there's no demand and that's where things fall apart. So, no crystal ball over here, but Missoula's market feels like it's going to continue to be strong, if not, steady to me.
It is interesting to see other or other smaller towns. I think of Boulder. I think of some of the small cities around New York, where they've experienced these kind of growth bursts and they haven't really crashed. So I think that it's interesting to see Missoula's housing policy be as proactive as they can be around some of those. For those of you who are paying attention to what's going on with the city housing policy, they are trying to be at least they recognize it and are trying to be proactive. I think with some of that to keep that from happening, because that's not what we want to see here either. So we had a question: if the first-time homebuyer class is mandatory? No, it's not mandatory. It's the only class we charge for at Homeward, and it's $35 a person. But depending on what kind of loan product you are going to use at the end of it, some loan products are going to require that you have homebuyer education. And in Missoula, Homeward is the HUD certified homebuyer class, so it's the one that meets that requirement for most home loans. So especially if you're using the governmentally backed loans, so RD or VA or FHA, It's a really good idea to get that class taken and out of the way so you're not trying to fit it in and close at the same time, because that just adds one more level of stress that nobody needs.
I see a question here. Do you feel the lack of inventory has been escalated by remote workers relocating due to COVID, or were we projected to be in this place regardless? A little bit of both. The Missoula Organization of Realtors puts out a great housing report, which will be coming, I don't know the date, soon. And we talk about the number of units that are needed, and we've been behind that for a while. So no matter what, we've had a tough inventory issue for a while. And then yes, COVID has a lot of us, it's allowed us to see how we can work differently remotely. And also I think that a lot of people have discovered what is really feeling important during COVID, and do you like your space? And if not, it's time to move. And so we do see a lot of people relocating. So both.
And Terrence asks here, what if I don't have 30% down? Terrence, that's okay. You don't need 30% down. The myth out there is that you have to have a 20% down payment to get into a house. Most loan programs have a much lower requirement than that. Most conventional loan programs start about 5. There are some first-time homebuyer programs that might be able to get you down to 3.5, or with like an FHA loan, 3.5. And RD have a 0% down payment. VA loans have 0% down payment. So there's definitely a wide range. What we get into when you're coming in with less than 20% down is whether you want to pay for a product called mortgage insurance. And there's lots of strategies around that. And that's one thing that we talk through in every class about what it is, how to use it, how to get rid of it, how to skip it. There's all kinds of strategies that come with that mortgage insurance, but that's the goal for that 20% down, is you don't have to worry about that if you have a 20% down payment. But let's be honest, how many of us in our early careers have, $60,000 lying around for a 20% down payment on a $300,000 house? Like, I don't have that just sitting around. So I think sometimes it's about getting your foot in the door, looking at your strategy for today and what's going to get you to the next step to be moving forward in your financial picture. So it's finding the balancing act in there. Dwight, thank you for posting the annual housing report. That's super helpful. All right. Any questions here before we kind of, maybe I'm going to talk you guys through a couple of case studies for common situations that I see for first-time homebuyers. But the class is 8 hours long, and it is a solid 8 hours of information, like cramming it into everybody's heads. So tonight, with half an hour left, I can't give you all of that in one small snippet. But I do want to give you a couple of things to be thinking about to whet your appetite for coming and doing the full 8 hours. So does anybody, okay, one last call. Any other questions before I start talking?
These are great questions, by the way.
Thank you, guys. Okay, so just a little bit more about Homeward. I'm just getting y'all arranged here with your questions, and so I can see your faces. So Homeward is a nonprofit in Missoula. This is our mission statement, to strengthen Montana communities by teaching homebuyer education and financial skill building, and creating safe and healthy homes that people can afford. So we're kind of in a unique position because we're trying to build or maintain affordable homes, both rental opportunities for Montanans as well as home ownership opportunities. So that's one side of the house, but the side of the house that I work in is our educational side. So I teach our first-time homebuyer class as well as do one-on-one counseling to help people achieve that goal. Sometimes it can be a multi-year process though. And so we also have our financial skill building course, which is really the course, if you have questions about your money, that's the course, like just general questions. It's the life skills of money that we all wish somebody had told us somewhere along the way. So whether it's rebuilding your credit, tackling debt, making sure that your student loans have a good trajectory and you understand what's going on with those, from taxes to budgeting, it's a little bit of everything to get you started. So both of those are educational opportunities that we offer. They're both 9-hour classes, 8 hours and a lunch. Um, but let's keep it on the homeownership side because that's where we're focused tonight. So one of the interesting things that I've been spending a little bit of time delving into, because I'm getting, we just have to ask ourselves this question. As millennials and Gen Zers, the rate of home ownership is less and at later ages than it is for any generation previous to us. And since the number one way most of the previous generations have built wealth for themselves is through home ownership. So the fact that millennials and Gen Zers are pushing this off to later and later puts us in a more tenuous financial situation than previous generations. So I always like to think through but when you live in a place that has a high cost of living and housing feels like it might be hard to get to or take you longer to prepare to get there, what should we be doing in the meantime to make sure that we are in the best financial place possible? Or honestly, with COVID, as things have gone, many places are able to be remote. Even if your job is located in Missoula, Montana, do you want to live right in Missoula? Or would you be willing to shift geographic locations to be able to find more affordable housing and a more affordable lifestyle generally? So I think that has to be a question that we do have to ask ourselves as millennials and Gen Zs, as younger professionals. How do we reach these goals and really focus on making sure that we are building our wealth along the way? And one of the things that strikes me as interesting, that as I was looking into this from the financial planning perspective, is that when we think about our bills, usually rent is at the top, right? You never miss paying rent because then you don't have your rent anymore. Mortgage is the same way. You never miss paying your mortgage payment. But if the difference between your rental payment, maybe you pay $800 for rent, but you could theoretically afford a mortgage payment of $1,200, and if you had a house and your mortgage payment was $1,200, you would pay that $1,200. Every month that you do that, you are saving $400 as you pay down your loan. Well, if while you were a renter, you could capture that $400 consistently on a monthly basis and potentially put it into investments, be able to save and invest in yourself, would you have a secondary path to wealth generation that might equal what a home would do? It depends on everybody's situation. It also depends on your bigger wealth generation goals, as well as, how are we going to meet our baseline needs? Now that also has to hinge on the fact that you can get a rental for less than a mortgage in wherever you're living, in Missoula particularly. For many of you who are in the rental market right now, it is not easy out there, right? Rents have gone up a huge amount. 2-bedroom, $1,100, pretty commonly. So there's some wiggle room in there, right? That's not a blanket statement saying don't buy houses. Yes, home ownership is still the number one way for families to pass down intergenerational wealth. That still continues to be true. But as we're waiting longer in life, I don't want our young professionals to be waiting on investing in themselves, even if home ownership isn't in their direct or near investment plan. How does everybody feel about that? Thumbs up there. It's an interesting concept that I've been sort of playing with a little bit, and I kind of have been digging on it. So, case study, real quick for you. So, a couple of things that I want to do quick notes before I dive into these numbers. At Homeward, we consider an affordable home payment to be one that is less than 30% of your gross monthly income. That's just kind of where we draw the line there for affordable versus overextended. So 30% of your gross monthly income. How much and what kinds of debts you have are going to impact what you can afford as well. You'll see why here in just a minute. Current interest rates are also going to impact the affordability. So those are the three kind of variables that I'm working with in this, but this is actually an example from the last couple of months. I went through and pulled out the most common things that I saw with clients that I met with. So this is a couple partners who want to buy a home together. The one partner makes $17 an hour, works full-time, 52 weeks out of the year. So full-time all year round. Their annual gross income is just over $35,000. Their partner makes $21 an hour, works 40 hours a week, but only works 40 weeks out of the year. So my wildland firefighters, my contract teaching professionals, anybody who's working basically 9 months out of the year, you have 12 weeks off. So together, their joint annual gross income is $68,960. So kind of think about that in comparison for where most couples are at in Missoula. That's really pretty. That's like 100% of our median income. That's really spot on for average wages. So that makes their gross monthly income, which is what all of your mortgage payments are set by. Their gross monthly income is $5,746. So when you sit down to meet with the lender, they're going to look at a couple ratios. Your housing ratio is simply of your gross monthly income, how much are you using to pay for rent or a mortgage, to pay for your housing? Your debt to income is all of your debts included, a mortgage payment if you have that. How much of your gross monthly income are you using to service debt? So again, my recommend is that we try to keep our housing ratio below 30%. So 30% of 5,746 would leave us with a potential mortgage payment of $1,724. That's how much in either rent or mortgage this person could potentially afford. Looking at their debt to income, I like to keep it at or below 41% so that we can leave capacity in budgets for monthly saving once you get the home, because then you got to take care of it. It turns out, there's maintenance and all of that kind of stuff involved as well. So I recommend that 41% total debt to income. So 5,746 by 41% leaves us with 2,326. Pretty averagely, I would see a debt load for this partnership coming in, having at least one car payment. So we'll call it $450, 5-year loan. Student loan, $200 on an income-driven repayment plan. That's kind of what I would see as an average. Credit cards, at least one of them with a minimum of a $25. So maybe one they pay off every month, but they use. So they have a minimum credit card payment on that one of $25. And then usually one with some more substantial credit card debt. So maybe $2,000 to $3,000 in credit card debt on a secondary card. And that would have a minimum of around $119. So all of that together, their car loan, the student loan, and the credit cards that they have, their debt obligations are $794. So from their total potential, the 2,356, we take out their potential debt obligations of $794, and that leaves us with a potential amount of $1,562. So as a counselor, if you already have debt that you've taken out, I am never going to recommend that we go with the higher of either $1,700 or $1,500. I'm going to always recommend that you go with the lower of those two. So for this particular partnership, a payment amount right around $1,562, $1,550, $1,575, somewhere right in there, is probably going to be a comfortable, or should leave them capacity to still meet other goals as well. So I did all the math for you guys. One fun thing about class, you actually get to learn all this math. So if you kind of like numbers, this is a really exciting section. So for a $1,500 a month payment, I came up with a 30-year mortgage on a $270,000 home with a down payment of 5%. So coming in with $13,500 is your down payment and a pretty good credit score. I'm talking 760 and above. Looking at about a 3.5% interest rate on that. Loans right now are a little bit lower than that. But looking ahead, rates have been going back up. So I used a 3.5, buffering with a little bit of conservative rate in there. So that could buy a house for $270,000. When I ran these numbers last Thursday, the only home in the direct Missoula area that was listed under $270,000 was this little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom out in Bonner. It's one of the company Milltown homes that was out in Bonner. So that's the little guy right there. It's pretty cute, but still that feels $270. Knowing where I was shopping in like 2012 and 2013, this like shocks my little heart to know that's where it's at. But looking at where wages are, it kind of all evens out. That's a case study. That's really typical of what I see with home buyers that I'm working with. Any questions there? Okay, hopefully that gives you guys some comparative numbers to start thinking about and looking at. Okay, so what do we do to prepare, right? We know we're coming into a tough market. There's things going on. Just make sure we got the chats. Nate asks, revolving debt payments. What about something that puts all your expenses on one credit card and then takes advantage of cash back but pays it off every month? So Nate, that's a really good idea. You just want to make sure that on that card that you have the capacity that you are using 30% or less of your credit limit. Even if you're putting all your gas and all your groceries, if you're spending $1,000 a month on those or $2,000 a month on those, you want to make sure that that doesn't go above 30% of your limit. So you probably want a more robust limit on that card, maybe 10,000, something like that. But also that could change your ratio. So if on that card the minimum payment is 119 and not 25, you may consider going into the home transaction, pausing how much you use that card for just a little while you are in the home transaction so that your lender can see that minimum payment. So even if you pay it off every month, it's whatever that minimum payment is that they're going to use. Does that help? Clear as mud? Okay. So preparing. The first thing, and I think one of the most important things, is just to be educated on what's happening in our market. Like I said, this is fast changing. What we were looking at last March is not what we are looking at now. What we were looking at in June is not the same as we are seeing right now. And especially as COVID moves forward and we start to open things back up a little bit, I think we're bound to see more changes happen. So this is an ever evolving sector that's out there, and you just want to make sure that you're taking advantage of educational opportunities so that you can be the best prepared that you can be. So our class is a great place to start. Workshops like this are a great place to get those quick pulse checks for what's happening in real time. I think that those are important to seek out. Building and protecting your credit. This is a huge one because when you go into the home buying process, you can have a beautiful 20% down payment and your ratios can be perfect, 29% and 36%. They can be beautiful. But it doesn't matter if your credit score isn't where we need it to be for you to get the loan to start with. And credit takes time to rehab and repair or to build when you're getting going. So that's why I like to have folks start this journey and really start paying attention to their credit 1 to 2 years before they're really ready to head into the home buying process. Prime credit right now, 760 and above. With COVID, we were seeing credit markets tighten down quite a bit. So for a while, the usual is you can get a loan with even credit score in like the 620s, like somewhere in there. But with COVID, we're seeing those go up. So 640 to 660 is the lowest that really mortgages are allowing. So we want to make sure that you know what your credit score is, your mortgage FICO score. I don't know if anybody else has been following the Credit Karma Vantage Score dust up of late when it comes to mortgages. It's probably just me because I'm nerdy about these things. But they were finding that the scores that people were seeing on Credit Karma were getting farther and farther away from what folks were seeing in their FICO scoring. So I usually in the past have seen variances of like 20 to 30 points, maybe a little bit more in some weird cases, but it usually wasn't a massive spread. In the last month, I've been seeing spreads where the point difference between what you're seeing in your Vantage scoring and your mortgage FICO are 100, 120 point difference, like huge differences. So if you haven't had somebody actually pull a mortgage FICO for you, it's a good idea to get real familiar with where you're at on that and then make sure that we're protecting it if it's where it needs to be, or making the changes that we need to rebuild and get it where we want it to be. So credit, super important piece of the picture. Keeping those debts low. especially during a time where a lot of folks may be experiencing income fluctuations through COVID. Trying to make sure that we're using those credit cards really responsibly, and keeping our other unnecessary debts as low as possible. That's just going to open you up with more availability for the home purchase itself, because your debt to income will have more breadth in it. And then a big one, practicing saving and living below your income or for the mortgage payment that you want. This is a tip that I give to almost everybody that I'm working with. If you go in and meet with a lender and they say, you know what, we're going to pre-approve you for a mortgage of this much, and this will be your payment amount. Go home the next month on the first of the month, pretend that that payment amount is your rent payment. Pay your rent out of it and just stick the rest in savings. If you can go from the first of the month to the 30th of the month without accessing that savings, then chances are that that's going to be a comfortable mortgage payment for you. If it's not, or you feel like you can't do anything, you can't have any fun, we don't want you feeling house poor at the end of this transaction. So giving it a try on, finding that right fit for you is a really important piece of it. And the beautiful thing is you can practice that before you commit to it. So that's one of my favorite things to have people do. So I threw this together because I think it's sometimes kind of hard. We talk about the steps in the process and we go way more in detail in this in the class, but to give you guys like the quick and dirty, what to expect here, and like, why does anybody even think about buying houses? This seems really stressful and unattainable and blah, I don't even want to think about it. So this is a thought process that's really common for folks trying to get into their first house. All right, I know that my current rent is $1,200 a month. I am already saving $100 a month minimum, comes out of my paychecks like clockwork. Pretty sure that when I look at my expenses, I could cut them by about $200. You know, I go to the brewery one less day, I get rid of Sling, I do, I cut out a couple of things, maybe not my fantasy football, it's fine. But that means between the two of those, like I could look at a mortgage payment of around $1,500 and probably manage that pretty well. So now that I have that number in mind, I head off to the lender. And when I sit down and meet with the lender, they're going to take a look at my credit and my income. They're going to tell me that they think they can loan me $250,000. It's 3.75% interest rate that day, 30 years. So we talk about what I can bring in for my down payment, what I have for savings. And my loan officer, I tell them I have personally saved $8,250. That's what I've got in my down payment savings account, my first time home buyer savings account. We're getting a little Montana tax credit there. And my folks want to gift me $5,000. So my total down payment is just a skosh over $13,000. So they're going to run some numbers, look at some different loan scenarios with you, walk you through, like I said, paying mortgage insurance up front, paying it monthly. They're going to walk you through a couple of different loan options. And so when you look at all the numbers, they're going to ask you, okay, if you want this payment amount, let's do a pre-approval letter for $255,000. So looking at everything that you want, and that'll give you a payment amount right around $1,530. So it's a little bit of a stretch for what you were thinking, but now you can go home and play with the numbers a little bit, now that you have all that in mind. So great, you've got your pre-approval letter in hand, you head off, you meet with your realtor, Mandy takes you around, and you guys see some houses, and you find the perfect one, $255,000. Woo, we did it, Mandy, $255,000. You do it. So you buy it, and you live in it, and you're happy there. And 7 years in the future, we're going to time travel just a little bit. So we're going into the future, 7 years. The house that you bought for $255,000, if there was a normal, healthy market growth, we would see it at something like 2.4%. So between 2 and 3%, maybe 4%. That's like healthy market growth. In Missoula last year, Mandy, I think it was 14% in 1 year, 11, 14. We're getting up into some pretty wild growth numbers for Missoula. But still, we're going to assume here that, like we talked about, like you guys asked for questions, what happens if the bubble bursts? Well, let's just go back to like a normal, like a healthy market growth. So in that case, in 7 years, just by market appreciation, your house is now worth just over $300,000. Yay! That doesn't include any like improvements that you've done there, those kind of things that might increase that value. That's just straight market appreciation. So the loan that you originally took out for $237,000 for this loan is now down to $206,000. In addition to paying the loan down, you've also paid $59,777, just call it $60,000 in interest. So in total, you've paid $107,941 towards this house. It's a lot. Okay, but fun fact. If in those 7 years I had stayed in my rental and paid my $1,200 and the rent didn't go up anytime during those 7 years, and I just continued to pay $1,200 in my rent, I would have paid $100,800 in rent in the same 7-year period of time and have nothing to get back for it. So that's really one of the most powerful things about home ownership, is being able to get your foot in the door and being able to stay there for time. Especially in a market like Missoula, where we do have expected healthy growth and maybe even more than that. So looking at a rate, I always like to throw this in there because rates are an important thing to be watching. Again, right now we're at historically low. This is not the bottom. It got down to about 2.75 for average credit first-time home buyers there for a while. That was the historically low. Now we're just a skosh over that at 3.125%, 3.25%, right in there. So the difference in interest on this loan, if when you originally took it out, you had pretty good credit, 740, and you got a 3.25% interest rate, the total interest you would pay over the 30 years, $161,000 and some change. If you have a little lower credit score, so we're looking at that 680 kind of range right in there, average for Montana. Most Montanans, I think the average is a 679, which is actually higher than it is nationally. Kind of average credit for Montana, maybe your rate's a 3.75. And you pay total interest paid, I think I flipped those around, 137,000. So if you get the better score, your rate is actually going to save you, just in the rate alone, just by having that better score, $24,000 in interest in the life of this loan. So it is important to be paying attention to your credit. I know that there's a lot of other things I would like to spend $24,000 on than interest, and I'm sure all of you have those same things. So I wanted to leave you guys with a few resources as well here as we head out into our evening. One is our class. This is just the very tippy tip of the iceberg. Like I said, 9 hours, we go through credit, the advantages, the disadvantages. We always do a market update in every single class. How to find that affordability, what goes into the mortgage, picking your lender, picking your realtor, what is a home inspector. We go through the whole shebang. And you have options. You can do it in one day. We either offer a Saturday 8-hour class, or if that's a lot of Zoom time for you, because right now they're all online, we offer them 3-week evenings. So usually a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 6 to 9. And I try to alternate months on those. Most of the time during the summer, because everybody likes to play on Saturdays in the summer. I try to do weeknights. But that's our homebuyer education class. If you're like, I'm still a ways out and I need to do a little bit of work, I know I have a little bit of debt that I would like to tackle before I get into homeownership. Our financial skill building class is a wonderful place to start. It's free. And when you get the class, Katie sets aside time for each class to meet with the participants one-on-one and do 4 months of financial coaching. And those are personalized sessions. So no two are the same. It's what you need that we are going to focus on. And they're free. And how often do we get financial professional help in our lives for free? Like never. So it's a really exciting thing. Her class is wonderful. She's a wonderful coach. And then if neither of those are appealing, there are a couple of online classes that you can take, but also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a great resource in their home loan toolkit. It's kind of a self-study course. You can take it and it will walk you through many of the scams and pitfalls that can come around mortgages and mortgage lending. They also, for those of you who are concerned about scams that are happening, they keep a current and running list of financial scams because we don't want folks to get caught in those. Especially during the home buying process, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about wire fraud. Big $6 billion in wire fraud in the last couple of years. You don't want to wire away your down payment to a Swiss bank account to somebody else or somebody in the Caymans. Like, we want to prevent wire fraud. There's a whole big section on it. CFPB is helpful, but there's lots of resources to keep that kind of scams down as well. So that's what I have in my prepared presentation, but I would love if you guys have questions or just thoughts, discussion topics, to take a few minutes here and just walk through what else you guys have. So, yeah, it's very scary. Wire fraud, not fun.
I'm always curious, when I have ever bought my homes, I've always loved a fixer-upper, but I notice that not everybody feels that way. What do you guys think? Do you love getting in there? When you imagine your first home, is it something that's like turnkey, ready to go? Or do you like the idea of putting some sweat equity into it? Oh, here's a great question on rural development loans, Julie.
Yeah, so yes, I do know more about rural development loans. The income guidelines really depend on what kind of rural development loan that you're going for. There are two kinds of rural development loans. There's ones called guaranteed or direct. Guaranteed have a little broader. Those are where you would go to a lending institution. So in town, Clearwater, Stockman's, First Security, First Interstate, all of them help do rural development loans. And so those are going to have like, they change every year. I think right now for the Bitterroot, it's something like 289,000, and it's a skoshmore for Missoula. Maybe 293,000 for cap on what you can buy using those kind of loans. Income guidelines they're going to be a little higher. So you can be like 120% or 180% of our area median income. The direct loans are where you bypass a lender and you go directly to the USDA and say, I'm a person of modest means and I would still like to buy a house. So can you help me facilitate this loan? And the USDA says, great, you're going to have to help do a lot of the paperwork yourself, but we're on it. And those income guidelines are much more strict. They're 80% of our area median income. So for a single person household right now, that's just a little bit over 44,000. For a two-person household, it's just under 50. To have access to those direct rural development direct loans.
And something to think about with rural development loans and FHA, there is a condition standard of the house. So when we were just talking about fixer-uppers, you have to watch that. So, if you're doing a rural development loan, make sure you're working with a realtor who has done a rural development loan so they can kind of help you keep an eye out on the properties that you look at that they will most likely qualify for that loan.
Yes, Mandy, that's absolutely right. And that's really something that you want to, that's where the marriage of your realtor and lender becomes so important, because if your lender says, I need you to use a rural development loan because we're going to go with 0% down, so these are the guidelines that your loan has, your realtor needs to understand those so they're not showing you properties that aren't going to qualify. Or when they look at the properties, they can see, I think this property is going to have a hard time meeting the RD appraisal that you might be looking for. So that's another really good question when you go asking around and finding that right team, making sure that they understand the loan, the financing that you're using when you go into the shopping process. That's huge. I'll do a quick plug here for those of you who are feeling like you might like to tackle a few home projects out there when you get there. I have had such amazing experiences with Home Resource here in town. Is everybody familiar with Home Resource? our reuse material center. The first 2 years we owned our home, we would make our list of our projects on the weekends and go. And what we would do is stop by Home Resource first and get everything on our list that we could get there. And then if we couldn't find it there, we'd go to Ace or Lowe's or wherever. We'd go like the box stores. And I added it up after a year. And each trip, by doing that, we would save $131 on average for stopping by Home Resource first. And so over a year where we were working on our house pretty much every weekend, it came up to a substantial amount of cash, as well as materials we were keeping out of the landfill. So being able to use our local resources, Missoula is rich in them. And that's a really cool resource that we have here. MUD is right next door. So again, the tool library. And then our Lifelong Learning Center facilitates some home ownership, like home maintenance classes as well. We've done electrical and plumbing and sprinkler maintenance, all of those through the Lifelong Learning Center. And I was able to maintain my sprinkler system for 8 years before it broke in a way that I had to call a professional in, which I felt pretty solid about as an investment in my time for that class. So looking at our Lifelong Learning Centers, opportunities and continuing education. For when you own your house, there's all kinds of really good resources that Missoula has. Montana tax credit. So I want to, and I probably didn't tell you guys, how many of you have ever taken classes at our extension office in town? The MSU extension office? It's located out behind Target on Santa Fe Court, and they have all kinds of fun classes out there. But something that the extension office offers are called the Mont Guides. And I'm going to drop this link in the chats here. Let me pull it up because they have a pamphlet on the first-time home buyer savings account that will explain it much better than I can, and it's up to date, which is, I try to keep up to date on these, but I haven't had a chance to look at it for the 2020 tax year yet.
And something to keep on your radar is, I know that the Biden administration is talking about wanting to do a first-time home buyer $15,000 credit. So I don't know that, nobody knows exactly what the details are yet, but that should be on the horizon.
Yeah, so here's the first-time homebuyer savings account. The Mont Guides are an amazing resource. If you've got questions about writing wills, estate planning, other basic like family financial management, they have these free publications on the website. You can go and just download them right there, 4 or 5 pages, and they're great basic guides that are based in Montana law, because a lot of these things will change state to state. So these are all written with our Montana law in mind. So if you haven't had a chance to check that resource out, also, they have all the gardening stuff too. So if you get aphids on your tomatoes and you want to know how to grow asparagus and what's hummingbird friendly plants, they've got all of that stuff as well, which is a delightful resource. Okay, so first time homebuyer savings account. They also have a really good one on declaring a homestead, so that you can protect yourself from, it's a debt protection strategy, which is really great. So lots of good information on things like that there as well. Just kind of a follow-up resource. Any other questions? Yes, let's announce a winner. Okay. So Kelsey, do you want to unmute and announce?
We are currently doing a random draw.
Yeah. Sorry, we're all in the same room. Yeah, you can hear me okay.
It's Zoom auto tune.
Yes. let's see here. Do we have a winner? Kelsey talking. It's very.
Can you hear me now? Did you
I
turn
don't know how to
it?
do this. We'll talk through this.
Mute yours, let him talk.
Okay, we figured it out. It's Will Stednick is the winner. If Will's here.
Yeah, I am here. Thanks.
You won.
Now, Mark, did he get one of the class participants or does he get two?
He got one.
One. You got.
One. So, Will, I think the prize tonight was a free registration for our class. So,
Terrific. Thank you.
value usually $35 and time with me, which I feel like is like value itself.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Julie, so much.
Yeah, go ahead and
Yeah.
get it out, Ian.
Yeah.
And Julie and Mandy.
I'll stand up. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Mandy. Everybody here at MYP. I think you can see us all. Thank you guys for joining so much. It was a great event, and I was glad to hear some things because I'm also looking for a home, as well as some other people here. So thank you so much. And we're gonna end out the presentation. But yeah,
We'll
Thank
have the
you guys so
recording
much.
up.
and the recording will be up. I'm gonna stop the recording here in a second. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all very much. And truly never hesitate to reach out with questions. If you're unsure of whether you're quite ready for class or not yet, we are a phone call or email away. And I am more than happy to chat with you and even do a one-on-one session to help you get going on this. Just know that there's support here along this journey in your community. And we are happy to be partners in it.
Fantastic.
So
Yeah.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
ladies. Thank you.
The chamber as well for helping us put on this event. We're in the chamber boardroom, so wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, have a good night, everybody.